Most stories about kings involve epic battles against evil enemies in order to save a kingdom. But these are mere shadows of the true story of the whole world. Our world has a king, a kingdom, and a royal story that's still unfolding today.
The story of God our King is a picture book that traces the kingship of God, the royal nature of his people, and his victory over the serpentine enemy through the whole story of the Bible. Throughout Scripture, there are echoes of themes repeated over and over. What we're trying to do with the Story of God series is to capture these themes so the whole story of the Bible can be told as a unified story, following the plot lines that God has already woven through it.
So one of the fun challenges while creating these illustrations was trying to make them in such a way that they do a lot of the heavy lifting with the storytelling.
For example, like in the early chapters of Genesis, the early chapters of Exodus have a serpentine enemy who doesn't seek the flourishing of God's people, but casts them into bondage to build his own evil kingdom.
So even in the ancient depictions of Pharaoh, he has this cobra-like headdress that he wears. In Scripture, like in the book of Ezekiel, the Pharaoh is cast as this dragon figure.
Then comes along this giant who is described as having bronze armor with scales. The biblical author is telling us that there is a serpentine quality about him. And we see the serpent enemy theme continuing to the end of Scripture.
Making these visual connections between the serpent and Pharaoh and Goliath allows children to see the deep spiritual realities in our world today. We should be wary of dragons and giants in the biblical story.
But the biblical story is not a story of doom and gloom. The dragon doesn't win. Just as God rescued his people from the grips of Pharaoh and Goliath, he rescues us from the great serpent, who was behind those human enemies all along. King Jesus deals a fatal blow to the serpent at the cross and defeats death in his resurrection, securing a royal and victorious hope for his people. Truly, he's a king like no other, defender and friend, always and forever, world without end.